The rain poured down in sheets as Thomas Wilson pulled the metal shutter down on his small auto repair shop. His hands were rough and calloused, stained with the day's work of oil changes and tire rotations. At 42, his face showed the lines of someone who'd weathered more storms than just the one currently drenching the street. He tugged his worn jacket tighter, eager to get home to his son Ben. As he turned to leave, a movement caught his eye. There, huddled in the doorway of the closed bakery next door, was a young woman. She couldn't have been more than 20, clutching a small suitcase to her chest, her clothes soaked through. Thomas hesitated only briefly. "Hey there," he called over the sound of the rain. "You okay?" The girl looked up, startled. Her dark hair was plastered to her face, and she quickly wiped at her eyes, though Thomas couldn't tell if it was rain or tears. "I'm fine," she said, but her voice betrayed her. "You don't look fine," Thomas said, stepping closer. "You need someplace to wait out the storm?" "I was about to lock up, but I'm not waiting out the storm," she said quietly. I don't have anywhere to go tonight." Thomas frowned. His own problem suddenly seemed smaller. He was behind on rent for their small apartment, and the electric company had sent another warning letter. But at least he and Ben had a roof over their heads. "I'm Thomas," he said, extending a hand. "Olivia," she replied, her cold fingers briefly touching his. "Olivia Reed, you a student?" Thomas asked, noticing the backpack at her feet alongside the suitcase. She nodded. "At City College. I had a housing scholarship, but there was some kind of mistake with the paperwork. They're saying I didn't file something on time, and now—" She gestured helplessly at her bags. "I can't afford the dorm without it." Thomas glanced at his watch. Ben would be wondering where he was. His 16-year-old son was responsible enough to be alone for a few hours after school, but Thomas tried not to be late. Still, he couldn't just leave this girl on the street. "Look," he said, "I know this sounds weird coming from a stranger, but I have a couch. It's not fancy, but it's dry. You could stay tonight, figure things out tomorrow." Olivia's eyes widened with suspicion. "I don't know you." Thomas held up his hands. "Fair enough. I'm Thomas Wilson. I own this shop, Wilson's Auto. I have a son named Ben. He's 16. We live about 10 minutes from here. It's a small place, but the couch is clean. No strings attached. Tomorrow I can help you make some calls, see about fixing your scholarship situation." Olivia bit her lip, looking up and down the deserted street as the rain continued to fall. "Why would you help me?" Thomas shrugged. "Because someone should. And because I'd hoped someone would do the same for Ben if he was ever in trouble." After a moment's hesitation, Olivia picked up her backpack. "Just for tonight," she said firmly. The drive to Thomas's apartment was mostly silent. Thomas called Ben to let him know they'd have a guest, and Ben's confused, "Okay, but why?" made Olivia smile for the first time. Their apartment was on the 3rd floor of an old building with no elevator. It was small, just 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, and a combined living room and kitchen. The furniture was mismatched but clean, with a few sports posters on the walls and a stack of school books on the coffee table. Ben was a lankier version of his father, with the same kind eyes and cautious smile. "Hi," he said when they entered, clearly confused by the sudden appearance of a dripping, wet college student in their living room. "Ben, this is Olivia. She's going to stay on our couch tonight," Thomas explained, grabbing a clean towel from the hall closet and handing it to Olivia. "Thanks," she murmured, looking around the apartment with an expression Thomas couldn't quite read. "You hungry?" Thomas asked, heading to the kitchen. "We've got leftover pasta." "I couldn't," Olivia started, but her stomach growled loudly, betraying her. "That's a yes," Ben said with a grin, already pulling out an extra plate. As they ate dinner at the small kitchen table, Olivia slowly began to open up. She was 19, a freshman studying business with hopes of starting her own company someday. She'd grown up in a small town about 3 hours away and had come to the city on the scholarship. "What about your parents?" Thomas asked gently. "Can they help?" Olivia stared down at her plate. "My mom died when I was little. And my dad? We don't talk much." Thomas nodded, not pushing further. He knew about difficult family relationships all too well. Ben's mother had walked out when Ben was just 7, deciding family life wasn't for her after all. After dinner, Ben helped Thomas make up the couch with clean sheets and a blanket. "It's not the Ritz," Thomas said, "but it'll do for tonight." "It's perfect," Olivia said, and something in her voice made Thomas think she really meant it. Later, after Ben had gone to bed and Thomas was about to turn in himself, He found Olivia standing by the window, looking out at the city lights through the rain. "Everything okay?" he asked. She turned, and there were definitely tears in her eyes now. "Why did you really help me?" "You don't know me. I could be anyone." Thomas leaned against the wall. "When Ben was little, there was a time when I almost couldn't make rent. My car broke down the same week I had to pay for Ben's asthma medicine. I was about $50 short, and the landlord wasn't the understanding type." He smiled slightly at the memory. "My neighbor, this old guy named Frank I barely knew, he slipped an envelope under my door with exactly the amount I needed. No note, nothing. I tried to pay him back later, but he refused." "So you're paying it forward," Olivia said. "Something like that." Thomas shrugged. "The world's tough enough without us turning our backs on each other." Olivia nodded, wiping quickly at her eyes. "Well, thank you. I promise I'll be out of your hair tomorrow." But tomorrow came, and Olivia's situation hadn't improved. The housing office was closed for the weekend, and she had nowhere else to go. "Just until Monday," Thomas found himself saying. "Then we'll get it sorted out." One day turned into 2, then 3. Thomas took Olivia to the housing office first thing Monday morning, but the news wasn't good. The scholarship couldn't be reinstated until the next term, and all the dorms were full. "I'll figure something out," Olivia said as they walked back to Thomas's truck. "Maybe I can find a cheap room somewhere." Thomas thought about their budget already stretched thin. But then he thought about how Ben had actually cleaned up the living room without being asked yesterday. How he'd seemed more engaged at dinner as Olivia had helped him understand his algebra homework. "The couch is yours until you find something better," Thomas heard himself say. "Just chip in what you can for food, help out around the place." Olivia stopped walking. "I can't accept that." "Why not?" Because you've already done too much." "Because I'm a stranger." "Because it's too generous," Thomas smiled. "You're not a stranger anymore. And it's not that generous. Our place is tiny and Ben snores. You might be begging to leave by next week." Olivia laughed, a real laugh that lit up her whole face. "I don't snore, I promise." "Then welcome home," Thomas said. "At least for now." As they drove back to the apartment, Thomas felt an odd sense of rightness. Their little family had been just the two of them for so long. Maybe, just for a while, there was room for one more. What Thomas didn't know, couldn't have known, was how much this simple act of kindness would change all their lives. Or that the girl sitting beside him in his old pickup truck, wearing secondhand clothes and worrying about college fees, was actually the daughter of one of the richest men in the country, a secret that would eventually turn their world upside down. 2 weeks turned into a month, and slowly Olivia became a part of their daily routine. Thomas would wake first, starting the coffee pot before heading to the shower. By the time he emerged, Olivia would be in the kitchen, making toast or scrambling eggs. She insisted on contributing, and had found a weekend waitressing job at a diner near campus. "You don't have to cook every morning," Thomas told her one day as she set a plate of eggs in front of him. "I like to," she said simply. "It's the least I can do." What Thomas didn't say was how nice it was to have someone else think about these small details. For years it had just been him, making sure Ben had what he needed, keeping their little household running, having another pair of hands, another person who cared, lifted a weight he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. Ben came out of his room, hair still wet from his shower, backpack slung over one shoulder. "Morning," he mumbled, reaching for the orange juice. "There's lunch money on the counter," Thomas said. The same words he said every morning. "Actually," Olivia cut in, sliding a brown paper bag across the counter. "I packed you lunch. Nothing fancy, just a sandwich and some fruit, but I thought, well, it might save a few bucks." Ben stared at the bag in surprise, then at Olivia. A slow smile spread across his face. "Thanks," he said, tucking it into his backpack. It was such a small thing, but Thomas felt a tightness in his chest watching his son's reaction. How long had it been since anyone other than Thomas had done something thoughtful for Ben? Their small apartment, which had always felt adequate if a bit cramped, somehow seemed warmer now. Olivia's few possessions, a stack of textbooks, a blue coffee mug, a small potted plant, blended into their space as if they had always been there. There were odd moments, though. Times when Thomas would catch Olivia staring at ordinary things with a strange fascination. The first time he asked her to help with laundry, she'd examined the washing machine like it was a complex puzzle. "You've done laundry before, right?" Thomas had asked, amused. Of course, she'd said quickly. Too quickly. It's just different from the one I'm used to. Or the time Ben had complained about having chicken for the third time that week, and Olivia had looked genuinely confused. Is that bad? She'd asked. To have the same thing? Small moments that made Thomas wonder about her background. She never talked much about her life before college, deflecting questions with vague answers or changing the subject entirely. One evening, as Thomas was fixing the leaky kitchen faucet, he asked casually, "So this father of yours that you don't talk to, he couldn't help with your housing situation?" Olivia, who was chopping vegetables for dinner, paused with the knife midair. "He could," she said after a moment. "But I don't want his help. Bad blood." She resumed chopping a bit more forcefully than necessary. "He wants to control everything. My major, my career, who I spend time with. If I take his money, I take his conditions." Thomas nodded, understanding. "That's tough, but sometimes pride costs more than it's worth." Olivia looked up, her eyes suddenly fierce. "It's not pride. It's wanting to know who I am without his shadow over me. It's about making my own choices even if they're not perfect." Thomas held up his hands in surrender. "Fair enough. I get it." The truth was, he did get it. After his wife left, he'd been too proud to ask his own parents for help, determined to prove he could raise Ben on his own. It had made those early years harder than they needed to be. As the weeks passed, their unlikely household fell into comfortable patterns. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, when Olivia had late classes, Ben would start dinner. Usually something simple like spaghetti or tacos. On Mondays, when Thomas worked late at the shop, Olivia would help Ben with his homework. Weekends became movie nights or board game competitions, with Thomas discovering that both Olivia and Ben were fiercely competitive at Monopoly. "I've never lost before," Olivia said in disbelief one Saturday night as Ben gleefully collected her last dollar. "Get used to it," Ben grinned. "Dad and I played dirty." It was during these quiet domestic moments that Thomas would sometimes catch Olivia watching them with an expression that looked almost like longing. As if this simple life, this small apartment with mismatched furniture and bills piled on the counter, contained something precious she had never had. And maybe it did. For all his financial struggles, Thomas had never doubted that Ben knew he was loved. They might not have much, but they had that certainty. There were still secrets, though. Sometimes Olivia's phone would ring and she'd step outside to take the call, her voice too low to hear through the door. Once Thomas came home early and found her quickly closing her laptop, looking guilty. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Fine," she said too brightly. "Just school stuff." Thomas didn't push. Everyone was entitled to their privacy. The truth began to unravel on an ordinary Tuesday in October. Thomas had stayed late at the shop, trying to finish a transmission repair that was already behind schedule. His phone buzzed with a text from Ben. "Livy's sick. Threw up twice. Said not to worry, but she looks bad." Thomas quickly closed up shop and headed home. He found Olivia curled up on the couch, pale and shivering despite the blanket Ben had draped over her. "It's just a stomach bug," she protested weakly when Thomas placed a hand on her forehead. "You're burning up," he said. "Ben, get the thermometer." The thermometer confirmed his suspicion. 102.5. "This isn't just a bug," Thomas said. "You might need antibiotics. We should get you to urgent care." "No," Olivia said, trying to sit up. "No doctors. I can't. I don't have insurance. It's too expensive." "Don't worry about that," Thomas said. "We'll figure it out." "No," Olivia insisted more forcefully. "I just need to rest, please." Thomas frowned. Even without insurance, a walk-in clinic wouldn't turn away someone with a high fever. But there was something in Olivia's eyes, a fear beyond concern about medical bills. "Okay," he said finally. "But if you're not better by morning, we're going to a doctor, bills or no bills." Ben brought water and crackers, hovering anxiously as Olivia tried to eat a little. Thomas gave her some Tylenol for the fever and sat with her until she fell into a fitful sleep. The next morning, her fever was worse. Thomas didn't give her a chance to argue, simply helping her to the truck and driving her to the urgent care center. In the waiting room, the receptionist handed Olivia a clipboard with forms. "I need your insurance information and ID," she said. Olivia's hands shook as she took the clipboard. "I don't have insurance," she said weakly. "That's fine, but I'll still need to see your ID for our records." Olivia reluctantly pulled out her wallet, sliding her driver's license across the counter. As she did, something else fell out. A sleek black credit card that Thomas couldn't help noticing. It looked expensive, the kind of card he'd seen wealthy customers pull out at his shop. The receptionist looked at the license, then at her computer screen, then back at Olivia with wide eyes. "Oh," she said, "I see. Let me get these copied for you right away, Ms. Reed." Thomas frowned at the strange interaction but was too worried about Olivia's health to dwell on it. The doctor diagnosed her with a severe kidney infection, prescribing strong antibiotics and rest. "You're lucky you came in when you did," he told Olivia. "This could have gotten much worse very quickly." On the drive home, with Olivia dozing in the passenger seat, Thomas's mind kept returning to that black credit card, to the receptionist's odd reaction. There was a piece of the puzzle he was missing. At home, he helped Olivia back to the couch and went to get her prescription from the truck. In the side pocket of her backpack, where she'd stored her wallet, he noticed a corner of paper sticking out. He shouldn't look. He knew he shouldn't, but something pushed him to pull out the paper. An envelope addressed to Olivia Harrington Reed, with a return address from Harrington Enterprises. Harrington. Even Thomas, who paid little attention to business news, knew that name. Robert Harrington was a real estate tycoon whose name was on half the new buildings downtown. With trembling hands, Thomas took out his phone and searched Olivia Harrington Reed. The results made his heart skip a beat. There she was. There Olivia, in a glamorous evening gown at some charity event, standing beside Robert Harrington himself. The caption read, "Real estate magnate Robert Harrington with daughter Olivia at the annual Children's Hospital Benefit Gala." Thomas stared at the phone, then at Olivia sleeping on his worn-out couch, wrapped in the faded blanket his mother had made years ago. The girl who had been washing dishes in his sink and worrying about college fees was the daughter of a man worth hundreds of millions. He sat heavily at the kitchen table, mind reeling. Why would she lie? Why would a millionaire's daughter pretend to be broke? And what was he supposed to do with this information now? As the sun set outside their small apartment window, Thomas watched Olivia sleep, suddenly feeling as though he didn't know her at all. For 3 days, Thomas kept his discovery to himself. He watched Olivia recover from her illness, taking her antibiotics dutifully and gradually regaining her strength. She thanked him repeatedly for taking care of her, insisting she would pay him back for the doctor's visit. "Don't worry about it," Thomas said each time, the words feeling hollow now that he knew the truth. He tried to act normally, but his mind was a storm of questions. Was everything she'd told them a lie? Was she laughing at their simple life behind their backs? Was this some kind of rich kid's game, slumming it with the working class for kicks? But then he would remember how Olivia had stayed up all night helping Ben with his science project when it was due the next day. How she never complained about the lumpy couch or the hot water that sometimes ran out mid-shower. How she always saved the last bit of dessert for Ben, claiming she was full even when Thomas suspected she wasn't. Those weren't the actions of someone playing games. On the 4th evening, when Olivia was feeling better and Ben was at a friend's house working on a group project, Thomas decided it was time for the truth. "Olivia," he said, sitting down across from her at the kitchen table, "I need to ask you something and I need you to be honest with me." She looked up from her textbook, her expression curious. "Sure, what's up?" Thomas took a deep breath. "Your last name isn't just Reed, is it?" "It's Harrington Reed." The color drained from her face. She closed her book slowly, her hands trembling slightly. "How did you—" "Your wallet fell open at the doctor's office. I saw the credit card. Then I found an envelope with your full name. I looked you up." Thomas ran a hand through his hair. "Why did you lie to us?" Olivia's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't mean to lie." "Not exactly. I didn't tell you everything. You're Robert Harrington's daughter. Your father is worth what, hundreds of millions. And you let us think you were broke? You let me worry about feeding another mouth when my own bills are barely getting paid?" The hurt in his voice was palpable. "I'm sorry," Olivia whispered. "I should have told you. Why didn't you? And why are you living on my couch instead of in some fancy apartment your father could easily pay for?" Olivia wiped at her tears, took a shaky breath. "Can I explain?" "The whole story?" Thomas nodded stiffly. "I think you owe me that much. You're right." She pushed her textbook aside. "Yes, Robert Harrington is my father. And yes, he has more money than anyone could spend in several lifetimes. I grew up in a mansion with maids and cooks and drivers. I never had to do laundry or cook or clean. Everything was done for me. Thomas listened silently, trying to imagine such a life. But it wasn't. Olivia struggled to find the words. It wasn't a home. My father was barely there, always traveling for business. When he was home, everything revolved around appearances. The right schools, the right friends, the right future. She looked down at her hands. He had my whole life planned out. I would major in business, then get my MBA, then join Harrington Enterprises as a junior executive. Eventually, I would take over the company. There was never any question about what I wanted. And what do you want? Thomas asked, his anger beginning to soften at the pain in her voice. Olivia looked up, her eyes suddenly bright. I want to start my own business. Something small at first, a cafe maybe, or a bookstore. A place where people feel welcome, where there's community. I've never had that, she sighed. When I told my father I was majoring in business but didn't want to join his company, he exploded. Said if I wasn't going to follow his plan, I wasn't getting his money. He thought I'd give in right away. I'd never had to support myself before. So you left? Thomas said, beginning to understand. Olivia nodded. I had some savings, birthday money my grandparents had given me that my father couldn't touch. I got the scholarship to City College legitimately, but when there was a paperwork issue, I didn't tell my father. I wanted to prove I could handle problems on my own. But you have a credit card, Thomas pointed out. I saw it. It's for emergencies only, Olivia explained. My grandmother set it up before she died. My father doesn't know about it. I've never used it because I know he'd track the statements, but I keep it with me in case things got really bad. Thomas leaned back in his chair. And the housing scholarship? Was that real? Yes, Olivia insisted. Everything I told you about that was true. I really did miss a filing deadline. I really didn't have anywhere to go that night you found me. You could have gone to a hotel, Thomas said. A nice one. And how would I have explained that when the statement came? My father would have found me immediately. She reached across the table, not quite touching his hand. Please believe me, Thomas. I never meant to deceive you. I needed to know who I was without all of that. Without the Harrington name opening every door. Without people treating me differently because of my father's money. Thomas was quiet for a long moment, processing. Part of him was still hurt by the deception. Still felt foolish for having worried about her finances when she could have bought his entire apartment building without blinking. But another part of him understood the desperate need to forge one's own path. To be seen for yourself and not for your circumstances. These past months, Olivia continued softly. Living here with you and Ben, it's the first time I've felt like I belonged somewhere, like I was valued for who I am, not what I represent. You have no idea how rare that is in my world. You should have told us, Thomas said, but his voice had lost its edge. I know. I was afraid you'd see me differently, that you'd think I was slumming it, or that I was hiding from responsibility. But it's not that. I'm not running away from hard work. I'm running toward finding out who I really am. Thomas sighed. I don't know what to think, Olivia. Or should I call you Ms. Harrington Reed now? She flinched at the formality. Please don't, I'm still just Olivia. The same person who's been living here for months. The money isn't mine, it's my father's. And right now he's made it very clear I don't have access to it. But you could, Thomas said. You could call him tomorrow, say you've changed your mind and go back to your mansion and private jets. I could, Olivia acknowledged. But I'd lose myself again. I'd go back to being a puppet with my father pulling the strings. She looked around the small kitchen, at the chipped mugs on the counter and the fridge covered with Ben's school papers. This might seem like nothing to you, but to me, this is freedom. This is real. Thomas ran a hand over his face, feeling the day's stubble. I need some time to process this, Olivia. It's a lot to take in, I understand. And if you want me to leave, I will. I've imposed on you enough. No, Thomas said quickly, surprising himself. No, you don't have to leave. Not yet, anyway. But no more secrets. I mean it, relief flooded her face. No more secrets. I promise. That night, after Olivia had gone to bed, Thomas sat alone at the kitchen table for a long time. He thought about privilege and struggle, about appearances and reality. He thought about how easy it would be to resent Olivia for her hidden wealth while he worked his fingers raw trying to make ends meet. But He also thought about the genuine joy on her face when she mastered making pancakes without burning them, about how carefully she counted out her waitressing tips, insisting on contributing to groceries, about the light in her eyes when she talked about her dream of building something of her own. Maybe money wasn't the only kind of poverty. Maybe Olivia had been just as poor as they were, just in a different way. As he finally headed to bed, Thomas made a decision. He would give her the chance to prove herself, to show that her words matched her intentions. Everyone deserved that much. What he didn't know was that his decision would soon be tested in ways he couldn't imagine. Because Robert Harrington had not given up on finding his daughter, and he was getting closer every day. The weeks following Olivia's confession brought a new openness to their household. With her secret revealed, Olivia seemed lighter somehow, more willing to share stories from her past. Some made Thomas and Ben laugh, like how she'd once accidentally set off the mansion's security system and had to explain to a dozen armed guards why she was trying to sneak a stray puppy into her bedroom. Others made them exchange troubled glances, like how she'd spent her 16th birthday alone because her father was closing a business deal in Tokyo. "Did you at least get a good present?" Ben had asked. Olivia had smiled sadly. A credit card with a $50,000 limit. The card arrived by courier. No card, no call. Thomas began to understand why this cramped apartment with its leaky faucet and temperamental heating might feel more like home to Olivia than the luxury she'd left behind. Here at least, people noticed when you were sad or celebrated when you succeeded. Life settled into a new rhythm. Olivia continued her classes and her waitressing job, still insisting on contributing to the household expenses. "You don't have to do that," Thomas told her. "Not now that I know." "Yes, I do," she said firmly. "This is about living honestly. I'm earning my own money for the first time in my life. Let me use it." Thomas respected her for that. In fact, the more he learned about the real Olivia Harrington Reed, the more he respected her determination to forge her own path. Ben had taken the news of Olivia's true identity with typical teenage nonchalance. "Cool," he'd said when Thomas explained. "Does this mean we can get better Wi-Fi now?" "No," Thomas and Olivia had answered in unison, then laughed. But not everyone found the situation amusing. One evening in early November, Thomas was closing up his shop when a sleek black car pulled into the lot. It was the kind of vehicle he rarely worked on, too expensive, too new. The kind his customers couldn't afford. A driver in a dark suit emerged and opened the rear door. The man who stepped out was in his early 60s, with silver hair and the kind of tan that comes from tropical vacations, not honest work. He wore a suit that probably cost more than Thomas made in a month. "Thomas Wilson?" the man asked, though something in his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Thomas wiped his greasy hands on a rag. "That's me. Shop's closed, though. If you need a repair, you'll have to come back tomorrow." The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'm not here about a car. I'm Robert Harrington. I believe you've been housing my daughter." Thomas felt a chill that had nothing to do with the November air. This was the confrontation he'd been half expecting since discovering Olivia's identity. "She's been staying with us, yes," Thomas said carefully. "She's a good kid." "She's not a kid," Robert said, his tone clipped. "She's a young woman with responsibilities to her family and her future. A future she's jeopardizing with this rebellion." Thomas crossed his arms. "Seems to me she's just trying to figure out who she is. Most people her age are doing the same." Robert stepped closer. "Most people her age aren't heirs to a multi-billion-dollar company. Olivia has obligations that go beyond her personal whims." "I don't think wanting to make your own choices counts as a whim," Thomas said, standing his ground. Robert studied him with cold calculation. "Let's be straightforward, Mr. Wilson. I understand you're in a difficult financial position. Single father, struggling business. It can't be easy. We manage, of course. And taking in my daughter, that was quite generous." He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a checkbook. "I'd like to compensate you for your trouble." Thomas stared at the checkbook, then back at Robert. "Compensate me?" "Yes," Robert said, uncapping an expensive pen. "I'm prepared to be quite generous. $50,000 should cover the inconvenience. In return, you'll encourage Olivia to come home where she belongs." The amount made Thomas's head spin. $50,000 would pay off his outstanding debts, fix the apartment's heating, maybe even put something away for Ben's college fund. It was more money than he'd ever seen at once. For a brief, shameful moment, he was tempted. Then he thought of Olivia's face when she talked about her dream cafe. The way she'd carefully learned to do laundry and cook simple meals. Her quiet determination to build a life on her own terms. "Mr. Harrington," Thomas said slowly, "your daughter isn't staying with us because I'm keeping her there. She's staying because she chooses to. And she's not an inconvenience, she's part of our household." "Everyone has a price," Robert said dismissively. "What's yours?" 100,000? Thomas felt anger rising in his chest. "You really don't get it, do you? This isn't about money. It's about respect. Olivia deserves the chance to make her own choices just like anyone else." "She's making a mistake," Robert insisted. "She knows nothing about the real world." "She's learning," Thomas countered. "Every day. And she's doing pretty well if you ask me. She works hard, she's kind, she's responsible. You should be proud of her, not trying to buy her back like she's property." Robert's face hardened. "Don't presume to tell me how to handle my family, Mr. Wilson. You know nothing about our world." "Maybe not," Thomas admitted. "But I know something about being a father. And if there's one thing I've learned raising Ben, it's that you have to let your kids find their own way sometimes, even if it's not the path you would have chosen." "Spare me the working-class wisdom," Robert snapped, putting away his checkbook. "If money won't persuade you, perhaps other measures will. I could make things very difficult for you, Mr. Wilson. A call to your landlord. A word with the bank that holds your business loan." Before Thomas could respond, another voice cut through the tension. "Stop it. Dad." They both turned to see Olivia standing a few feet away, her face pale but determined. Next to her, Ben looked uncomfortable but stood his ground. "We came to bring you dinner," Ben explained to his father, holding up a takeout bag. "Livy wanted to surprise you." Olivia stepped forward, placing herself between Thomas and her father. "What are you doing here?" she asked Robert. "Bringing you to your senses," Robert said. "This charade has gone on long enough, Olivia. It's time to come home." "This isn't a charade," Olivia said, her voice stronger than Thomas had ever heard it. "This is my life now. My choice. Your choice?" Robert laughed without humor. "You think playing house with this mechanic and his son is a life? You're a Harrington. You have responsibilities. I'm also a person," Olivia countered, "with my own dreams and plans." "Why can't you understand that?" "Because it's childish nonsense. You want to start some little cafe? Fine, I'll buy you one. But you'll do it the right way, with the right education, the right connections." "Your way, you mean?" Olivia said quietly. "Always your way." Thomas put a hand on her shoulder. "Olivia, Ben and I can give you some space if you want to talk to your father privately." She shook her head. "No. Anything he has to say, he can say in front of you. You're my family too now." The words hung in the air between them. Family. Such a simple word, but so powerful. Robert's expression darkened. "I see, so you've replaced us so easily. What about your mother's memory? What about everything we've built for you?" "Mom would have understood," Olivia said, her voice catching.
"She always told me to follow my heart."
"And I'm not replacing anyone. I'm just finding my place. My real place. By washing dishes and sleeping on a couch." Robert scoffed. "You could have everything, Olivia, everything." "I already have everything I need right now," she said simply. "Friends who care about me for who I am, not what I represent. Work that means something, even if it's just serving coffee. The chance to build something of my own." Thomas watched the battle of wills between father and daughter with a mixture of pride and concern. Olivia stood tall, no longer the uncertain girl he'd found huddled in a doorway months ago. But he could see the pain in her eyes too. The wish that her father would understand, would support her even if he didn't agree. "Mr. Harrington," Thomas said finally, "it's getting cold out here. Why don't we all go back to our place? Have some dinner, talk this through calmly." Robert looked at him with disbelief. "You think I would set foot in your dwelling?" "It's not the Ritz," Ben piped up unexpectedly. "But we have decent coffee and clean forks. Livy even made pie yesterday." The simple, earnest offer seemed to throw Robert off balance. He looked at his daughter, really looked at her for perhaps the first time, taking in her second-hand sweater, her messy ponytail, and the quiet confidence in her stance. "You're really serious about this," he said, less a question than a realization. "I am," Olivia confirmed. "I need to do this, Dad. I need to know I can stand on my own 2 feet." Robert was silent for a long moment. "And if you fail?" Then I fail, Olivia said with a small shrug. And I learn from it and try again. That's how it works for most people. Another silence stretched between them. Finally, Robert straightened his already impeccable suit. I see there's no reasoning with you tonight. But this conversation isn't over, Olivia. It never is with you, she said, but there was a hint of fondness in her exasperation. Robert turned to Thomas, his expression still hard but less hostile. Mr. Wilson, you should know that I am not a man who gives up easily, especially not where my daughter is concerned. He turned. The week after Robert Harrington's appearance at the auto shop, strange things began happening. First, Thomas received a letter from his landlord announcing that all tenants would face a 30% rent increase starting next month due to property improvements. The timing seemed suspicious, but Thomas had no proof of Robert's involvement. Then the bank called about his business loan, suddenly concerned about irregularities in his payment schedule, despite Thomas never having missed a payment in 5 years. Again, he couldn't prove anything, but the coincidence was hard to ignore. It's him, Olivia said when Thomas mentioned these incidents. This is how he operates. Subtle pressure, nothing direct. Plausible deniability. What do we do? Thomas asked, the stress evident in the new lines on his forehead. Olivia bit her lip. I could go back. Just temporarily. Make him think he's won, then negotiate some kind of compromise. No, Thomas said firmly. We're not giving in to bullying tactics. We'll figure something out. Ben, who had been quietly listening, looked up from his homework. What about Grandpa Joe? Thomas shook his head. I don't want to drag my father into this. He's on a fixed income. Not for money, Ben clarified. For advice. He used to be a lawyer, right? Maybe he knows if what Mr. Harrington is doing is legal. Thomas considered this. His relationship with his father had been strained since his wife left, but they'd been talking more lately. That's not a bad idea, Ben. The next day, Thomas called his father and explained the situation in careful terms. Joe Wilson, retired after 40 years of practicing law, listened without interruption. Sounds like harassment, he said finally. Hard to prove, but if you can document a pattern, you might have a case. This Harrington fellow has deep pockets, though. It'd be a long fight. I'm not looking to sue him, Thomas explained. I just want him to back off and let Olivia make her own choices. Joe was silent for a moment. Bring the girl to Sunday dinner. I want to meet her. Sunday dinner at Grandpa Joe's small house was a tradition Thomas and Ben had neglected lately. The old man lived about an hour outside the city, in the same modest home where Thomas had grown up. Are you sure about this? Olivia asked nervously as they drove. Your father might not approve of me either. Thomas smiled. Dad's nothing like yours. Trust me. Joe Wilson was tall and lean, with the same kind eyes as his son but more weathered by time. He greeted them at the door in a flannel shirt and jeans, his handshake firm when he met Olivia. So you're the young lady causing all this fuss, he said, his tone neutral. Olivia straightened her shoulders. I suppose I am, sir. Joe studied her for a moment, then nodded. Well, come in. Pot roast is almost done. Over dinner, Joe asked Olivia questions, not about her father or her wealth, but about her studies, her career goals, her dream cafe. He listened attentively to her answers, occasionally nodding or asking a follow-up. You've thought this through, he said finally as they finished dessert. That's good. Too many young people chase dreams without a plan. I still have a lot to learn, Olivia admitted, but I'm willing to work hard. Joe turned to his son. And you? You're prepared to deal with whatever pressure this Harrington fellow puts on you? Thomas met his father's gaze steadily. I am. Olivia deserves a chance to build her own life. Joe leaned back in his chair, a hint of a smile playing around his lips. Then I might have an idea. But it'll take some cooperation from all of you, and a bit of a poker face. The plan was simple but clever. Joe had maintained connections from his legal days, including a friend who now worked as a business reporter for the city newspaper. If Robert Harrington was operating in the shadows, they would bring his tactics into the light, not directly accusing him, but making it clear that any pattern of harassment against Thomas would be noticed and documented. Rich men like Harrington hate publicity they can't control, Joe explained. The hint that his family drama might become public will make him reconsider his approach. It's risky, Olivia said. He might just get angrier. Maybe, Joe acknowledged. But bullies usually back down when someone stands up to them. The key is not to threaten, just to make it clear you're not helpless. The next day, Joe's reporter friend came to the auto shop for what appeared to be a routine human interest story about small businesses surviving in a changing neighborhood. The reporter took photos of Thomas at work, interviewed him about his history in the community, and mentioned plans for a series of articles about local entrepreneurs facing challenges from large developers. No direct mention was made of Robert Harrington, but the implication was clear enough to anyone paying attention. Thomas Wilson had allies and a platform. If pressure continued, the story could shift from human interest to investigative reporting. 3 days later, Thomas received a letter from his landlord stating that the planned rent increase had been postponed indefinitely. The bank also called to confirm that his loan was in excellent standing with no concerns about his payment schedule. It worked, Thomas told Olivia, showing her the letters. Your father backed off. Olivia wasn't convinced. This isn't like him. He doesn't give up so easily. She was right. The following weekend, as they were grocery shopping, Olivia's phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Hello? She answered cautiously. Olivia. Her father's voice was calm, almost pleasant. I'd like to meet with you. Just to talk. No pressure, no demands. Olivia frowned. I'm not coming back, Dad. I'm not asking you to. Just lunch. A public place of your choosing. You can bring your friends if it makes you comfortable. Olivia looked at Thomas, who had stopped pushing the cart to listen. Why the change of heart? She asked her father. There was a pause. Let's just say I've been doing some thinking. And some research. After ending the call, Olivia relayed the conversation to Thomas. What do you think? Is it a trap? Thomas shrugged. Only one way to find out. But I'll be right there with you if you want to meet him. They arranged to meet Robert at a casual diner near campus. Neutral territory, far from both the luxury he preferred and the auto shop he had last visited. Olivia insisted that both Thomas and Ben come along. We're in this together, she said. All of us. Robert arrived precisely on time, dressed more casually than Thomas had seen him before, though his casual still meant a tailored shirt and designer jeans that probably cost more than Thomas's entire wardrobe. He nodded stiffly to Thomas and Ben, but his eyes were on his daughter. You look well, he said, and something in his tone suggested surprise. I am well, Olivia replied as they all slid into a booth. An awkward silence fell as they studied their menus. The waitress came to take their orders, pancakes for Ben, sandwiches for the adults. Robert looked somewhat bewildered by the plastic-coated menu, but ordered coffee and a club sandwich without complaint. Once the waitress left, Robert cleared his throat. I owe you all an apology. My approach was inappropriate. Thomas nearly choked on his water. This was not what he had expected. Why the change of heart? Olivia asked, echoing her question from the phone call. Robert looked uncomfortable. I did some research on Mr. Wilson here. Asked around. What I found was enlightening. What does that mean? Thomas asked warily. It means, Robert said, that I learned you're well respected in this community. Your business has a reputation for honesty. You've raised your son alone under difficult circumstances. You're not... He paused, seemingly struggling to find words that wouldn't be offensive. You're not what I initially assumed. And what was that? Thomas couldn't help asking. Robert met his gaze directly. I thought you might be taking advantage of Olivia's naivety, using her or perhaps expecting some financial benefit down the line. Dad, Olivia exclaimed, horrified. Robert held up a hand. I said I was wrong. When I offered Mr. Wilson money and he refused, quite forcefully I might add, it made me reconsider my assumptions. Their food arrived, creating another pause in the tense conversation. Ben, seemingly oblivious to the undercurrents, happily dug into his pancakes. So where does this leave us? Olivia finally asked, picking at her sandwich. Robert took a careful sip of coffee. I'm proposing a compromise. I won't pressure you to come home or join the company immediately. You can continue your experiment in independence. It's not an experiment, Olivia interjected. Whatever you want to call it, Robert continued smoothly. In return, I ask only that you meet with me regularly, say once a month, to discuss your progress. And that you consider taking some business courses that would be useful regardless of what type of venture you eventually pursue. Olivia looked suspicious. That's it? No strings attached. Just one more condition, Robert said, looking at Thomas. I want your word that you'll encourage Olivia to make decisions based on her own best interests, not loyalty to you or your son. If at some point she decides this arrangement isn't working, you won't stand in her way. Thomas considered this. That's fair. Olivia's free to make her own choices. She always has been. Robert nodded, seeming satisfied. He turned back to his daughter. Do we have a deal? Olivia looked from her father to Thomas, then to Ben, who had maple syrup on his chin and was listening with surprising attentiveness for a teenager. Monthly meetings, she said slowly, but not at your office or the house. Somewhere neutral like this. Agreed, Robert nodded again. Reasonable, and one